Hi everyone, welcome to TECSperts, where we here at the East Carolina talk about the upcoming football game.
Trailing East Carolina by 8. Frazier across the field, boom, what a big hit.
This is Tori Poole, one of the football beat writers for the East Carolinian.
Taking a shot up top. Coverage on. Touchdown, Pirates.
It's Adam Decker, the only returner from last year besides me, who is now gone from football beat writer to football editor.
Just watch here. He's trying to cradle it. That ball never hit the ground.
This is Jaron Honeycutt, our other football beat writer. Welcome to TECSperts. Today we're going to talk about the Virginia Tech versus ECU game, as well as ECU versus Central Florida this week. So, guys, it was kind of a bad game.
ECU definitely needs to bounce back this week. Can't be showing up like that expecting to win.
Yeah, this is the second week in a row that ECU's had to really just start from behind, and both weeks due to poor special teams play. And that was something that Montgomery really touched on in his presser was how he's going to start getting his starters more. He's going to put his starters in special teams and just have the best of the best playing in that. But it really does dictate your game plan when you're playing from behind. And now against two powerhouses, which though South Carolina might be having a down year, I do agree that Virginia Tech is very tough and very underrated, and I actually think they'll win the Coastal Division in the ACC. But I think that ECU is going to have to learn to stop playing from behind so they can run their own game plan.
Yeah, I think that it's just like it started off bad with ECU's offense. They just couldn't get anything done. They just couldn't get past the 50-yard line. They just couldn't make their way down the field. And then once Virginia Tech started bringing all that pressure on Philip Nelson, I feel like it messed with him a lot. I feel like he was expecting to get hit on every single play, and it's hard to move the ball down the field whenever you're expecting to get hit on every single drive.
Right. So when it comes to the special teams, of course, he says he's going to correct that with playing some starters on special teams. But when it comes down to offense, and this week they're going to have less of a high pressure defense this week than they've had the last 2 weeks. So what do you think that the offense can bounce back from?
I think that this Central Florida game is going to be the game that the offense gets back in rhythm. Like we've just been talking about, obviously the last 2 weeks, the offense hasn't looked great. Being last week they couldn't move the ball because of how great Virginia Tech's defense was, and the week before that game turning the ball over in the red zone so many times. So they're back home, they're in their comfort zone, they're going against a smaller school in Central Florida. The offensive line won't get pushed back as much. The offensive line will hold its own, and I expect this offense to do really well. I think Philip Nelson's going to have some time in the pocket, get to spread it out, and I think Ann Scott's going to reemerge as a strong player for ECU.
I think not playing against such a studded defense, the ECU has the chance to find their identity finally. I mean, they've been doing a great job of passing these past 2 games. Obviously, they can't get in the end zone, though. That's been really tough for them. And Zay Jones, everybody knows how well he's doing, but what has really ceased is the running game once you get in the end zone. And, there's Jimmy Williams, but everyone else is pretty much, where is everybody else? That's what you're –
Stephen Baggett, they had Bryce Williams last year, and Stephen Baggett, what's he have, 3-4 catches this year.
Yeah.
It's like their tight end's really a blocking tight end now. He's not even really a vertical threat at all.
So the ECU offense has been put on alert. Besides Zay Jones, everybody else, James Summers, he's played good, but now everybody else, we're looking for you. Time to step up.
Yeah.
All right. So when it comes to it, UCF is of course won. I think they won their last 2 games, or at least their last one.
They won last week, yeah.
Last week,
lost
right.
in Maryland, 2 overtime game.
Right. So when it comes to that versus ECU, who's lost their last 2 games, UCF is right in the middle between Virginia Tech and South Florida, which is going to be one of the tougher games that they're going to play this year. How do you think UCF is going to give ECU problems?
Well, I definitely think that ECU is going to come into this game with a chip on its shoulder, because last time they played Central Florida was that Hail Mary as the buzzer expired. So I definitely think
last time they played them.
Dowdy-Ficklin, I mean. Last year was kind of a fluke. Just Central Florida they were just terrible. ECU manhandled them, but last time they played in Dowdy-Ficklin, the Hail Mary, you look at players like Deshaun Amos, who was on the field during that Hail Mary when Rashad Perryman caught the ball. He was a sophomore then. He's a senior now. He's been having a down year so far. Hasn't been playing very well. So if you look at him, maybe he's got a chip on his shoulder. Maybe he's like, all right, I'm gonna come out, and really set the tone for the defense this week. So I also think Central Florida's improved a lot. They got a new coach. They got Oregon's offensive coordinator Frost. Mm-hmm. He's their head coach now, and Central Florida is not going to be a tune-up game. ECU's not going to walk over them like they did last year. This is going to be a test, and we'll see where ECU's at in the conference with this matchup. So
yeah, ECU's defense is what's going to have to be really, that's going to be the main, theme probably this week in Montgomery's practice, because we're talking about Frost, who came into Oregon, and once he was, put in their offense. I think it was in 2009. He became coordinator in 2013. But once he's put in their offense, that offense went to I think it was like 30, beyond 30th in running, and maybe beyond like right out of the top 10 in passing, and went to number 1 in both categories the next year. I mean, we're talking about somebody who knows how to run an offense. So ECU might not see the studs that it's seen the past 2 weeks, but it will see a lot of different play calling and a lot quicker tempo is what I assume. But, it's really going to depend on, the emotions ECU brings too. You can't come in there, and just let emotions overwhelm you and get out of the game. You got to, look at UCF as if they're any other opponent. You can't have a chip on your shoulder. You can't have, 2 losses bring you down.
Yeah, I know that I talked to some of the players at practice about, what's the defense been doing to kind of help themselves out, because in the past, throughout the season really, they kind of struggled with the run game. They've kind of struggled with stopping people. They've always been letting out, these big runs right when they need to hold them. Like in the South Carolina game, it was right there on 4th down, and all they had to do was hold the ball back for a chance to try and go down the field and get that win. And they broke free for a 25-yard run. And then ECU's been bringing a lot of pressure, but just can't seem to get to the quarterback. So I think that they've been working on that a lot in practice. They talked about how they've been putting more tight ends and stuff on offense to show more blocking, like what other teams are doing against them, so they can start working to figure out how to get past that and make a bigger change. And I think, judging by what they've said, that they're going to definitely show that out against UCF.
That's going to be big too, because Central Florida had a little quarterback trouble, and they're starting a true freshman now, and they run the ball heavy. That's what this offense does well. They're really strong in the ground game. So the ECU defensive front, even with Dimitri McGill's injury, they're gonna have to step up, get some penetration on the defensive line, and the linebackers are gonna have to fill their gaps and tackle the ball carrier.
That'll be interesting to see too, that McGill injury, because he's the heart and soul of the D-line.
Yep.
And Fred Presley, he's a great defensive end, and Montgomery said that he wanted to put him on the end because he's more aggressive. So it'll also be interesting to see how, because he's expected to fill McGill's role, how aggressive he can be inside, and how, I guess DeMaggio and Justin Brown will probably feel that on the outside.
Mike Myers is getting his first start.
All right. So it'll be interesting to see, how they game plan that up, if they want them to be more aggressive or more just kind of contain on the quarterback. Because Mackenzie Milton, even though, like you said, UCF is a big running team, I mean, when he was playing, 8 different receivers touched the ball against FIU. Although they were winning big, so it was easier to spread it around. So this is the 3rd team that ECU will be playing with a quarterback. I don't know if I'd say controversy, because their starting quarterback, he's out. He
got injured. Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
All right, third quarterback they haven't really seen on tape a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So last thing before we get into predictions, let's talk about conference play, since conference play is about to start. ECU has one of the easier sides of the conference compared to, where they don't have to play Houston, they don't have to play Memphis.
Yeah.
They have some tough games with Cincinnati and South Florida. So what do you think is the outlook for ECU in the conference?
Well, one thing is, despite the loss at South Carolina and at Virginia Tech, it's easy for a team and for fans to get down on their team, but ECU very well is still in this, conference play. And if they go on a streak and they win all but one game, maybe in this conference, because South Florida, that's a tough team. They got them after Central Florida. South Florida's a tough team. We're returning a lot of starters, but if they get through, maybe lose 1 or 2 times, they can still be pushing for the AAC championship game. Maybe get to play Houston or probably Houston, but get to play them and really make a name for themselves. But it's going to be tough. The Americans on the come up, and teams are getting a lot bigger, getting a lot harder. So I definitely think ECU is going to need to start it off right with this win this week against Central Florida, especially because they got South Florida, the toughest opponent remaining on the schedule.
I don't think anybody on ECU's schedule is you can truly look at them and say this team is an automatic loss for ECU.
Yeah.
Maybe Navy, because
They can't
there's been
stop them.
exactly there's been so many years that we've seen that people have seen ECU just absolutely fell to that.
See, but one thing, new coaching staff, new defensive
Exactly.
coordinator, so we don't know
you can't
how
really
they'll
say
do this
anything
year.
about it because really coaches who know how to stop the option, that's it. They know how to stop the option and it doesn't grow from there. Coaches that don't know how to, they never can conform to it. So it'll be interesting to see if Kenwick Thompson knows how to handle Navy's option. I think South Florida is going to be strong, but I don't think South Florida definitely is one of those teams that you look at right beside ECU and say, hey, that's a win for South Florida because they're so much better. Because really,
They're all up in the air.
Exactly.
South Florida, Cincinnati, and Navy
I don't
will
even-
most likely be the three. I mean, Cincinnati gave Houston a run for its money up until the fourth quarter. So
ECU doesn't plan this year, but Memphis was good last year, but I don't
Yeah.
even know how they can be this year.
Yeah.
Losing, Fuente was a big loss. He was a good coach, and he's the only thing that's made that football
Paxton
program
Lynch,
relevant in a while. Yeah, Paxton Lynch too. But Houston is a top dog definitely. So
Yeah.
it's probably.
and we're seeing teams like Temple, who last year Temple was ranked in the lower 20s last year. They had a really good year. They had a very stout defense last year, and you saw the success they had. They had a bunch of people graduate, and then now they're struggling a little bit to start the year. So the AAC, or at least on the ECU side, is up for grabs at this point, and we'll see. We'll definitely see a team that surprises people and jumps out with a couple consecutive wins and really takes off with it.
ECU just they have to channel their momentum. They can't have any games like I think it was 2 years ago when they went into Philly and they played Temple on that.
Fumbled 6 times.
Exactly. You have
They
to.
were ranked 16th then too.
That also, which people probably wouldn't think it says a lot about coaching, how your coach brings you into a game, and that was an awful loss at that time of the season. That would have been 11 wins, wouldn't it?
Something like that.
Yeah.
They lost to South Carolina, and then they went on us.
Yeah.
Streak. So
Right. So now we're going to get into predictions. Of course, we're going to start down there with Adam.
I can't remember the exact score I predicted. I know 38-20. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
No, I changed it when you had the exact same score as me.
Okay.
So I'm going to ECU. I think there's going to be some hard hitting, a little rough patch there to begin the game, being that these two teams are kind of rivals, and I think ECU's offense is going to flourish. Like I said earlier, I really think that being what happened the last 2 weeks, ECU's offense, Philip Nelson, Isaiah Jones, are going to come out firing some deep balls. I really think the offense is going to flourish. So I think the offense will put up points. I'm going to go 38-24 ECU. I think that's what I had, but I'm not 100% sure.
Right. Of course, Adam is the only undefeated one here.
4-0, listen to me.
2 closest scores as well. All right, Jaron is actually the worst here at 2-2.
3-1 on the show, though. Let's be real.
All right, so Jaron, what is your prediction for today?
I predicted ECU 31-20. I think that they were going to be very relieved this week from not having to play such a dominant Virginia Tech team, and also from not having to go under their coach's whistle all practice, because I'm sure that Scotty Montgomery was really, really blowing that whistle this week, trying to emphasize penalties and just, implementing your starters into their special teams is going to be a huge thing. Special teams has absolutely, killed them the past 2 weeks. So I think that it's going to be Scotty Montgomery is going to expect perfection. I think they'll deliver. Obviously, UCF, they do have some power running on that team and everything. So I think they'll crack the end zone a few times, but I think it'll 31-20 ECU.
All right, Tori, finish it off for us.
Okay, so I think that, opposed to what Adam and Jared were saying, I think that the ECU defense is what's really going to flourish this game. I think being back home, having their fans behind them, I think that's what's really going to show out. So I'm predicting 24-7 ECU, just because I think that the offense is still going to be figuring out those little bit of struggles and everything, but I think that the defense is really going to be who shows up for the game.
All right, that was TECSperts this week. Thank you for watching. Come back and watch us again next week.